Check. 1 2 1 2. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of Perfection Unfolding. I am your host, Cara G. So good to be here. So good to know that you tuned in, even though I don't really know. But if you are listening to this, then I'll just know that I know in my heart of hearts. Anyway, happy Tuesday. What the hell? It's already feels like the middle of the week. Episode 2, crazy. Thank you so much for everybody who tuned into episode 1 and listened to the trailer. I've got like 100, I guess, quote unquote, downloads so far, and that feels really cool. People are listening in Denmark, or at least a person is, and somebody's listening in the Netherlands somewhere. So just super cool. It's cool to get all the support that everybody sent me. Thank you so much. You guys are the real MVPs. I appreciate you. I love you. And yeah, so let's get this thing off the ground. How the hell are we? Just want to sit and check in with yourself for a second. Maybe take a deep breath. If you're driving, hopefully you do a couple more of those breaths, make you feel better if you're going into work, if you're coming home from work. Couple deep breaths, a little bit of breath work will help pass the time, make you feel a little less crazy on the road. If you're jamming in the gym or you're somewhere at home just doing chores, #me too. But yeah, so I want to start. So last week we talked about, the philosophy of perfect. This week's going to be a little bit different, but I want to start the show moving forward with a segment I want to call Today I'm Grateful For. And I want to do this, A, because it's going to set the intention of the show. And B, gratitude is something that I'm trying to cultivate in my life all the time. Like, a big part of perfection unfolding is being grateful for what's happening in the here and now. It's being present. It's being mindful of what's going on in your life and being grateful no matter what it is, right? Like everything has a purpose and a plan and a reason and a season. And I'm a person who doesn't subscribe to coincidence. I don't think anything's on accident. I think everything is very intentional. And some might say, well, what does that mean, that we have free will? And to that I say, I think it's a dance. I think we're dancing with our purpose and our choice at the same time. I like to think that. I think that that's cool, in social dancing, if you're into the Latin dance, like me, there's a lead and there's a follow, and you can't have one without the other, which is kind of like the yin and yang idea. It's like the masculine and the feminine. It's the up and the down, the left and the right, the quote unquote good and the bad, the helpful and the hurtful. You can't have one without the other. And I like to just sit in gratitude for all of it. I mean, I'm literally the person who I'm in the middle of crying and because I'm so sad about something. And then like 1 second later, I just think to myself, this is so beautiful. This is why I'm here. I'm here to feel everything and to experience everything and to just let it all wash over me. And so gratitude is something that I practice because it helps me recalibrate to that. It helps me remember that. Because it's really easy to just slip into pessimism. It's real easy to just be like, F this, screw this, like, no, you know what I mean? And listen, for those of you who know me, you know that I've been going through a lot of stuff in the last couple months, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. And I am just actively choosing, like I'm using my free will to choose to see the bright side of it. And not just to see the bright side, but to accept the dark, to accept and honor the dark, and to honor the shadow, and not just brush it off, and not just, do this like, performative optimism. No, like genuinely appreciating the darkness, the tough times, the sadness, the grief. I've been grieving a lot. I feel like the last 2 years I've just been grieving so much. I've been grieving old versions of myself. I've been grieving relationships. I've been grieving what I thought a relationship was going to be or what it could be or what I thought it was. I've been grieving lost friendships. I've been grieving lost jobs. I've been grieving lost opportunity. I've been grieving potential. Oh my God, nothing will break your heart more than potential, right? My own potential, the potential of others, so on and so forth. So I want to start every show off with just a today I'm grateful for segment. And before I get into what I'm actually grateful for, I did do a little bit of research. You're welcome. Because there's a science, that gratitude isn't just like a willy-nilly thing that just makes you feel good. Like there is science behind it. There's science behind putting good energy, putting helpful and grateful energy into the world and getting that energy back, right? And a person who was kind of like a pioneer in talking about mindfulness and talking about gratitude and how important it is on the scale of, consciousness, if you will, is Sir David R. Hawkins. He's an MD, PhD. And I found this article. I found this article on basically his publisher's website. He's since passed away. He's no longer alive, but he was just this like thought leader in mindfulness, and he made this whole like 17 stage like map of consciousness, and he lays it all out in this book called Power versus Force. I haven't read the book, but I've heard about it and I've heard people talk about it, and it's supposed to be very dense. It's very wordy. It's very heady. It's a lot of science. I mean, the man was a spiritual leader and a scientist, so he had this kind of cool combination of being grounded and enlightened, and yeah, it's just dope. And I plan on doing more research on him, but the little bit that I do know about him, I want to share with you because that's what I'm here for. So anyway, I found this article, and I'll link it in the show notes. That talks about that biography of Sir David Hawkins. And it says this. He says, Sir David Hawkins, MD, PhD, was a nationally renowned psychiatrist, physician, researcher, spiritual teacher, and lecturer. The uniqueness of his contribution to humanity comes from the advanced state of spiritual awareness known as quote-unquote enlightenment, quote-unquote self-realization, and quote-unquote unio mystica. That sounds fun. Rarely, if ever, has this spiritual state occurred in the life of an accomplished scientist and physician. So he kind of bridged the gap between, spiritual quote-unquote woo-woo-ness and the practical world of science and medicine. It goes on to say, therefore, Dr. Hawkins was uniquely qualified to present a spiritual path that is scientifically compelling to modern society. It goes on to say, the classical hallmarks of this state are pristine awareness of ultimate reality, compassion for all beings, tireless dedication to alleviate suffering, radiate joy, and humor. People from all walks of life, nationalities, and spiritual orientations honor Dr. Hawkins as a teacher of advanced awareness, exemplified in the title, and this is like a long Korean phrase that I'm not even going to try, but it translates to foremost teacher of the way to enlightenment, which was bestowed upon him in Korea. So that's a little bit of background on Sir David Hawkins. Like, just this cool old man just going around and helping people find joy, like helping people cultivate a life worth humor, a life worth living, alleviating suffering. Cool freaking guy. And I plan on doing more research on him and ultimately reading his book, Power versus Force, because it's fascinating to me, this map of consciousness. I've looked at it before. And if you go in there and you read, the scale, you can just Google this, the map of consciousness. It'll pop up all these different numbers. It's a scale from 0 to, I think, 1,000. Let me pull it up for you so I'm not lying to you right now. Map of consciousness. Yeah, here we go. So he wrote a book. He literally wrote a book, The Map of Consciousness Explained. And the title is, like the subtitle says, A Proven Energy Scale to Actualize Your Ultimate Potential, which, I mean, this is just my bread and butter. I mean, come on. This is all I care about is how do I level up? How do I make myself better? How do I cultivate sustainable change, And just to give you just an idea of the things that he talks about on the scale, it goes from 0 up to 1,000. And at the bottom is shame. And then there's guilt, apathy, grief. And these are all in the survival paradigm. And then it goes to fear, desire, anger. And then there's this jump that happens from survival into reason and integrity. And that's the jump from pride to courage. And apparently that's supposed to be like the hardest thing to do, to go from pride in survival mode into reason and integrity, which takes courage. And then from courage, it goes up to neutrality, willingness, acceptance. And then the next jump is between reason and love. And reason is in reason and integrity. And love jumps to the spiritual paradigm. And it goes love, joy, peace. And then ultimately, 700 to 1,000 is enlightenment, right? And it's dope. Like this map of consciousness, it names the level. It's an energetic log, which is the number 0 to 1,000. The predominant emotional state that you're usually in when you're feeling these levels, what your view of life is when you're in these levels, your God view, and then your process. It's really fascinating. So I just want to share that. And I'm probably definitely going to get into that map of consciousness in later episodes as we kind of get more into the juicy, nitty gritty kind of, tools that I'll be talking about and discussing. But back to gratitude. So I found this quote, this article by this guy named John J. Murphy on mindfulleader.org. And he talks about, he kind of summarizes David Hawkins' view on gratitude, and how important it is and how it works, essentially. I was going to try to read David Hawkins stuff and like watch his videos, and I was like, let me get the cliff notes, okay? Because I'm not trying to bore you to death with lectures, but you can go on YouTube and watch David Hawkins lectures on this channel called his publishing channel, his publishing company who publishes his books called Veritas, Veritas Publishing. They post like clips of all of his stuff. So if you're curious what he looks like, he's this cute old man with a beard and white hair. And he talks about several different kinds of things like illness and self-healing, how to get out of depression. The field is infinitely powerful. What is the significance of karma? All these different kinds of things. And you watch him talk and you just feel like your grandpa's just telling you a story of how to, be better and do better. And it's just kind of like nice. It's like watching Bob Ross talk about spirituality. I guess that's how I would describe it. So anyway, so John J. Murphy wrote this article summarizing gratitude. And there was a section in this article that said, gratitude, a vibe of optimism, growth, and prosperity. It says, Dr. Hawkins explained that everything in the universe has a measurable frequency. Again, that map of consciousness. In terms of human feelings and emotions, these frequencies range from shame, guilt, and grief, the lowest of the frequencies, up to joy, peace, and enlightenment, the highest of the frequencies. Appreciation and gratitude calibrate right up there with joy and peace. Okay, so appreciation and gratitude calibrate right up there with joy and peace, the top of this map of consciousness scale. So when we are feeling grateful, we are calling for more abundance and prosperity in our lives. Like energy attracts like energy. Feelings of gratitude attract more things into our lives to be grateful for. Like love, the more we give, the more we receive. While quote unquote misery loves company, love, appreciation, and joy attract love, appreciation, and joy. So it's essentially a practice of attracting what you are, right? If you are pessimistic, you're going to attract more pessimism. You're going to attract more things to be pessimistic about. If you are grateful, you're going to attract more things to be grateful about. I mean, this is basic science. This is basic law of attraction. And I even wrote in my notes, the importance of gratitude. Gratitude's important because it's the key to manifesting and living the life that you love. The more you give, the more you receive. The more you give thanks, the more you have things to be thankful for. It's the same thing. So I want to start this show, even though it's already technically started, just giving, like, today I'm grateful for waking up. Okay, and this gratitude practice it can be as simple as that. Today I'm grateful for having eyes that blink. I'm grateful for having a stomach that digests my food. I'm grateful that I have access to decaf coffee in the mornings and a lot of honey to sweeten it up, right? that can be that if you are just getting into the practice of gratitude, it can be so simple. Like just pick 2 or 3 things like right in front of you that you're grateful for. I'm grateful for this cup, this blender bottle from Whole Foods that is stainless steel. I'm grateful for that cup. I'm grateful for this pen that I'm writing with because I like how the ink flows out of it. I'm grateful I'm grateful for like all the small stuff, but today my I'm actually grateful for nuance. I'm grateful for my intuition and how tapped in I am to her right now. And she's a her because she's me, and I say that she is. I'm grateful that I have the tools and ability to make decisions with full confidence. I'm grateful for the quesadillas that I ate for dinner. I haven't had cheese in 5 almost 6 years. And yesterday I was just like, you know what? Screw it. Let me just eat this quesadilla and just see what happens. I just want to see what all the hype's about. See if I still like it. That motherfucker slapped. Okay, filled my belly and put me right to sleep. So that's what I'm grateful for today. I'm grateful for nuance. I'm grateful for my conviction to listening to my intuition and trusting my gut. I'm grateful for change. I'm grateful for the light and the dark, baby. I'm grateful for challenge. I'm grateful for, oh my God, like there's so many things that have changed in my life recently. And on paper, it sounds so bad, but in reality, it's gotten me excited. Like it makes me feel like I'm doing something right. Like when I'm shaking up my shit and I'm doing what feels good and I'm doing what I said I was gonna do. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for integrity. Mm, yeah. I'm grateful that my actions align with my values. Yeah. And I'm grateful for this voice. I'm grateful for this opportunity to share my voice to scale, for whoever wants to hear it. I'm grateful for my story, which I'm going to share with you in a second. And that's how I want to start the show every day. And I would love for you to do the same. I would love for you to pause this and just sit for a second if you're able. If you're driving, please don't slam your brakes and crash into a car. But just take a second and pause this and just think of 3 things you're grateful for. They could be super small, super big, whatever it is. And now that you're back, um, awesome. I'm so glad that we can do this gratitude thing together because I think you'll find that the smaller the thing you can be grateful for, just the more present you become. And the more present you become, the more of your actual life you're tapped into and you're actually living. Because something else that Dr. Hawkins speaks about is that, there's no future or past. They don't exist, right? The only moment we can really live in is the right now, right? And the right now sets you up for the future and gives you something to look back on and be happy about and remember in the past. So, yeah, being mindful, being present, being grateful, all things I'm trying to cultivate more of. And hopefully it helps you too. That being said, excuse me, I have a couple of life updates. For those of you who know me or those of you who don't, I'm gonna go ahead and give you do my life update segment that I want to do for every show too. So I'm moving to California. I'm not gonna get into the details of where, obviously, for safety reasons. But long story short, I'm moving to California at the end of the month, and it's for work. I found a job where I basically get to be a photographer, videographer in the mountains in California, just like outdoors, hiking, taking pics, doing videos. And it's gonna be really, really fucking cool. I'm very excited. And For those of you who know me personally, you know that I've been fired recently in a really weird, chaotic way. Details I'm not going to get into, but it just that instance just kind of, it was such like on paper again, it should have been this thing of like, oh my God, like, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to make money? Like, I was an independent contractor. Like, I don't have anything lined up. But the reality of it was, like, as soon as I got that text, because I was fired through text, LOL, makes me laugh too. Um, as soon as I got that text, it was like this weight was just lifted off my shoulders. Like, my gut knew that that's not what I was supposed to be doing anyway. And honestly, the way the world works, I'm sure that the person who fired me, like, they probably were picking up on that. They were probably picking up on the energy that, like, no, I don't belong there. You know, like, you're doing me a favor. Thank you so much. Like, and I genuinely mean that. And but like it just was this massive weight that just lifted off my shoulders, and instead of like going into a way of thinking that I probably would have in the past of like freaking out, kind of like what I described earlier. What am I going to do? How am I going to make money? Kind of going into straight manic mode. I I went from what I would have done before, been like, oh my God, like it's all on me now. Oh my God, and like freaking out. But instead, I surprised myself and I went into, oh my God, like it's all on me now. I can do whatever I want. And it was almost like the exact same words I would have used, but the the connotation behind it, like the energy behind it, totally flipped on its head. And I don't know, I can't pinpoint exactly why or when that shift happened, but I think it has everything to do with just kind of how my year has unfolded. Um, and and I'm gonna get into it now. And this leads me perfectly into today's like main topic of discussion, which is who the hell is Cara G? Right? Who am I? Right? This is Perfection Unfolding with Cara G, right? If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcast or wherever. But like who am I? And why should you care? Why who am I to be a person on the internet just talking to you about, you know, perfection or perfection unfolding or enlightenment or gratitude or any of these things. And the short version is you're doing it because you want to, you know, just cuz you can. But the long version is like I'm a person who has been through a bunch of things that have led me here, right? Like we've all been through a bunch of stuff and I feel like we're all on this journey, especially if you're listening to this podcast, you either know me because this podcast it's not like I'm famous or anything. You know me and you know some of my story and you think that there's wisdom to be found in that, and that's my hope. And so since that is my goal and since I promised you, you know, some some vulnerability and some anecdotal stories, like I want to go ahead and just lay the foundation, lay the groundwork of who I am and what my story is, what I've been through and how I got here, right? Who I am, who I've been, who I plan to be, and what it looks like in real time of how I'm getting there. How I'm like actively unfolding my perfection and actively working through my shit and sifting through my garbage and recycling what's good and yeah. So let's get into it. This is so cool. Ah! So here we go. I've got some notes here because I listen. I'm a little chaotic, so you know I got to stay organized. So who the hell is Cara G? Short story. I wrote some notes. Short story. I'm a self-diagnosed recovering people pleaser with ADHD, a big heart, and a burning desire to cultivate a life worth living. To cultivate a sustainable life worth living. Let me correct myself. The long story, sort of, or another part of the short story, I value my health and my relationships above everything. And I work my ass off to educate myself on how to do that to the best of my ability. Like a couple years ago, maybe 2 years ago, possibly three at this point, who knows? It's 2023. A big part of my journey started in 2020, as you can imagine. But a couple years ago, I had this, you know, basically dark night of the soul. I don't know what else to call it. Just mental breakdown where I was just like, who the fuck am I? Like, who am I? What am I doing? Like, what are these habits that I have? Like, where do they come from? Like, why do I let these kinds of things happen? Why am I people pleasing over here? All this stuff. And when I kind of came through that, and I'm going to get into it in a little bit, but when I came out of that, I realized what was important to me and what I valued the most, and that is my health and my relationships. Everything else is extra. Everything else is cherries on top, icing on the cake. But like my cake, like the thing that I think matters the most, that I value the most, that I hold to the highest standard for myself and for the people who I surround myself with, my relationships and my health. And as soon as I had that clarity, everything else worked itself out. I think that's really cool. So that's kind of the short story. I'm a recovering people pleaser. I've had undiagnosed ADHD my entire life, and for those of you who have diagnosed ADHD, congratulations. I'm a third generation, at least from where I can track, undiagnosed ADHD person in my family. There could be some autism going on there. I don't know. Listen, if everything's a spectrum, and I think of a spectrum in a circle, not so much in a straight line, we all got a little something going on. We all got a little spice going on, you know. Depending on where you fall on that spectrum, I just like to think that I'm just a little special. That's all. Just a little special, you know. My brain's just always working, thinking, and making patterns and coping with the weird little idiosyncrasy, you know. But things I used to resent about myself, now I think are dope. Things I used to think were annoying and unhelpful, now I'm like, nah, that's my superpower. Yeah, cool. Like, this is just who I am. This is just what I'm about now. Dope. And who's for me is for me, and who's not, fuck off. With love, respectfully, obviously. So anyway, so let's get into the long story. So I am essentially a military brat. I grew up not even doing the cool stuff that military brats got to do. I never got to live in Germany. I never got to live, in Korea or do anything cool like some of my friends. I moved to Texas when I was a kid. My dad went overseas and he stayed overseas for like 8 years, 7 or 8 years. So I was, my parents were together that whole time. But really, when you grow up in a military house in a military town, you get two things. You get a super diverse group of friends. Like, I was the vanilla bean white chocolate of my friend group of all these beautiful different shades of brown women, you know. And then the second thing you get is daddy issues. And I laugh about that because it's just true. It's just when your dad's gone for 8 years of your childhood. When I was a kid, I didn't think anything of it. I was just like, oh, dope. I get to see dad 4 weeks a year. Cool. This is totally normal. My parents never see each other. I never see my dad. Like, he calls every day because my dad's an interesting man, and we'll get into that too. But as I've gotten older, I'm like, oh, that's actually not the most normal setup. Pretty good. Great childhood. I have no real complaints, but as I've gotten older again, some issues have come up, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's like probably not the most helpful coping mechanism. But we're working through it. So yeah, so grew up military brat. Didn't move around a whole lot, but moved around just enough to be confused and to feel out of place and to feel like a loner. But not a loner who was alone, a loner in like a massive group of people, right? I was the middle. I'm the middle of three kids. So naturally that manifested as me working for every ounce of attention that I ever got. And not for no reason. I mean, when I say work for my attention, I mean, I was in dance, I was in theater, I was in band, I was in volleyball, I was in community theater, I was in school theater. I was in high school dance, I was in studio dance. I did everything. You could not tell me no. And remember, ADHD, right? So you could not tell me no. I was getting all the dopamine from every direction and still somehow managed to keep like okay grades, like A's and B's and the occasional C, which I never did my homework and I never tried, until the very last minute, which again, time blindness, ADHD, right? Um, but I did all the things. So I worked for my applause and I was going to make sure that people looked at me and they watched me and they were going to tell me I was great. Like that was my thing. That was my thing of like, you will not ignore me. You will see me and you will praise me. And that's how I'm going to get my fix. That's how I'm going to get my love and affection. And it worked. I mean, people freaking, I started hip hop dancing when I was in the 4th grade and it was a wrap. That was it. That was it for me. That was how I was going to like win over everybody. And it worked. I mean, I was in I was in a military town in the middle of Texas and it was dope because again, the diverse friend group. I mean, there was biracial people all over the place. There was black people and Mexican people and Asian people and white people and because military towns people are always coming and going and they're coming from all over the place. And I thought that that was normal, you know. And it was awesome because I learned how to hip hop dance and I kept getting better and better. So like in my group of friends, I was like I'm Cara G or I'm Cara, the white girl who can dance. The white girl with the ass. One summer I went from being chubby and tubby and then all that belly fat just went straight to my tits and my ass and when I turned 12. And I don't know why or how, but that put me on. Like people were like, oh, Cara with the ass, Cara who can dance. I was just this, white little hip hop girl who wore freaking no, well, I didn't always wear baggy clothes, but I would wear hip hop clothes to school. Like I would wear lime green. I wear my lime green, like Nike. Uh, I don't even know what type of Nike shoe it was. Probably Air Force Ones. My lime green basketball shorts, my lime green like t-shirt, and this was 2007, so the neon colors were totally in. But I did it, but it was like I was the Billie Eilish before Billie Eilish, right? Like I was wearing the oversized tee and the basketball shorts as a white girl with like my little scarf, and I wore a vest every day. Just an eccentric kid, okay? And I ate that shit up. I ate that attention up. Oh my God, did I eat it up? I would pretend to hate it, but deep down, I was just like, give me more, give me more. Um, so I did all the things. Um, again, dancing, singing. I did all the sports, anything to get me out of class, really. Anything to get me on a bus in the middle of the day to go somewhere. I even tried pole vaulting, you guys. And listen, I did one practice. Oh well, I did a couple practices. They actually let me compete, which was really, really sad on their part because I was so bad. I was so bad that in practice one day, because I can't run very fast, so I was like jogging. When I was trying to approach the vault to go over, and I shit you not, I slow motion, I went up like a whole foot, and then slow motion twisted, fell, and then the pole ricocheted into my cooter, and that shit hurt so bad. And my coach thought that was just the funniest thing. Oh man, you would have thought I was a comedian. So anyway, so I did all the things. Um, and this kind of informs my childhood, right? So I'm running around, I'm doing way too much, and my mom's enabling me. She's just like, whatever you want, honey. Because listen, when you're a single mom raising 3 kids and your husband's overseas, and you're working full time, like you have mom guilt. And she's told me about this. She's like, you have mom guilt. You don't want to say no to your kids, and she didn't say no to us. And when I look back, I'm like, damn, like I was burnt out at age 12, right? I was burnt out from age like 12 all the way through college. And I didn't know what balance was. I didn't know what rest was. I didn't know that that wasn't a sustainable way to live, and be healthy. But neither did my mom, and I don't blame her for that at all. Like she was doing the best she could with the tools she had. And she didn't have a whole lot of tools, right? Um, And also, I was ornery as hell. Like, you couldn't tell me anything. You couldn't tell me anything. If I wanted to do it, I was gonna figure out how to do it. If I wanted to go somewhere, I was gonna make sure all my chores were done and that I made it to a point where my mom couldn't say no to me, right? And when she would say no, I would freak out. I would be like, you guys, it was bad. I used to have like, temper tantrums, and I would like scream on my pillow, and I would, very gently throw shoes at my wall because I didn't want to break any of my stuff. And I would just have these like obnoxious screaming temper tantrums in my room, like, nobody loves me. Why do you hate me? Which, makes sense that I was in drama because I was a very dramatic, very sensitive child. And being on stage, singing and yelling and screaming, it just made sense for me. Um, so that's like my early childhood. I idolized my mom. Um, my dad, I loved the shit out of my dad, and I wanted so desperately like for him to, I wanted his approval for everything, right? Like he was my dad. Like I was his little princess, and every time he'd come home, like it'd be good for like 2 days. But my dad was in the military, and not only that, my dad was traumatized when he was a kid. Like his dad beat the shit out of him, and totally would have totally been in prison if he was held to today's standards for parenthood. He would have been in prison for a long time. Um, so that was my dad's childhood. So he did what he could, but he scared the shit out of me. And it was one of those things where, uh, my mom was the empathetic one. She was the level-headed, grounded one, and my dad was the hothead. Like he was the guy with PTSD, not just from the military, but from his childhood. And as you can imagine, like he would be home. He'd come home from war for 2 weeks. So what do you think is going to happen? Like you can't recalibrate to society in 2 freaking weeks, bro. Like he'd come home, he'd be good. He'd sleep for 2-3 days. He'd wake up from jet lag, and he'd see a sock on the floor, and he'd freak the fuck out. He would just like scream at us and intimidate us, and now that I'm an adult, I know that he wasn't doing it on purpose. I mean, that's just the way that was his coping mechanism. But listen, it did a number on me, my brother, and my sister. And I very quickly realized that the way to survive that is by people pleasing. And I I copied my mom's form of survival to a T. Like my brother, his coping mechanism was flight, right? My sister's coping mechanism was freeze. She just shuts down. And my coping mechanism was fawn. So I'm going to like fawn my way out of the situation. That's what I learned from my mom. Just ignore it, let him go be mad. Everyone gets upset. We go to our rooms, and then an hour later we come out and we pretend like everything's fine. Everything's back to normal. And that's how I dealt with things. From moving on, like moving forward. I just would fawn, or I manipulate the situation to where, I would try to make sure I did everything humanly possible so that he wouldn't blow up at me, or he wouldn't get mad, or he wouldn't have an episode or get triggered. And as you can imagine, that's not a very healthy, sustainable way to live. Like walking around on eggshells in your household, not helpful, really, especially when you're a child and like you don't know anything else. Not helpful. But it's your only way of life, and you do what you got to do to survive, and that's what I did. So that happened, that was all the way through my childhood, and then and then I moved to the East Coast. Um, and my dad came home from overseas, and then we all lived in the house together full time. But luckily for me, at this point, he left for the first time when I was 9. And I saw him for 4 weeks every year until I was 16. And so when I was 16, I moved from, this diverse community with people of all shapes, sizes, colors, backgrounds and religions to literally the middle of nowhere in Maryland. Amish country. Like that's how in the middle of nowhere we lived. And as you can imagine, it snows all year round in that area, if you know what I mean. It's just all white people, just a lot of white people. Yeah. Um, which was fine. It just was a culture shock. It shocked me. Like I didn't know that there were actually places in the world that were still so like I don't know, singular. I culturally undiverse, which I guess makes sense. I mean, you only know what you grew up in, but until you see something else. And this was a shock to me. Like there was no dance team. There was no like in Texas, if you know anything about Texas schools, like they go hard, right? These schools are massive. Like I went to what would be considered now like a pretty medium sized school, but at the time it was pretty big. I went to a 5A 6A school where my class was 600 people. And then I moved to Maryland and my class was like 100 kids. And that was the biggest class that had come through that school since the 80s or something. And, so again, there was no dancing. There was nothing really super special about the school. They didn't have classes dedicated to band or classes dedicated to theater. They just kind of did everything after school. Like, and what was funny is it was just like the movies. Like I'd never seen a movie where people talk about Texas high school culture, right? Because everything happens on the east or the west coast. But then I moved to the east coast and I'm like, oh, this is just like small town Maryland. Like there's TV shows about stuff like this. Um, so that was kind of cool. But yeah, so I show up on the first day of school with like, again, I was kind of this like little bit of people knew me at my school in Texas. Like I was the white girl who could dance. I was Cara Campbell, like the white girl with the ass. Like that was just kind of my reputation. Like I was fun loving. I was goofy as hell, and I wore really bold clothes. And there was a time where I was wearing like a red bold lip and a winged eyeliner every day with a string of pearls. Okay, I looked like Lucille Ball. Like I looked like I Love Lucy, but just like the kid version. I would wear polka dotted dresses to school. Again, if I wasn't dressed up like a hip hop dancer, I would be like decked out. I'd wear dresses, and it was just like every day was a fashion show. It was so fun. But I had a fully beat face every day with my little CoverGirl foundation, um, which just cracks me up. So naturally, I show up to school. Uh, I show up to school with this like really cute outfit. Like my hair's all scrunched up the way that I used to do it back in the day. And I'm wearing this bright red lipstick and this winged eyeliner and this cute like sage green top with my cute little lace vest and my bell bottom jeans with my cute little tan Oxford shoes. Like you couldn't tell me anything. I thought I was a fashionista. And I walk into class and everybody's wearing their just like tank tops and shorts or their North Faces. I don't know what the hell they were wearing, but just regular everyday clothes. And I could just see people's faces. They were like, who the hell is this girl? Like, who does this girl think she is? Like, where did she come from? Because my thought process was, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to move across the country and I'm going to be sad and I'm going to be pissed, like, I might as well make an impression, right? Like, and as self conscious as I was when I was younger, like, I was never self conscious about, about that. I don't know. I had this weird kind of like, I don't know, delusion about myself. I don't know what it is. I think it was my ego was definitely built up because of all the people who boosted me for my dance ability and like my I don't know, I had a really solid community of people lifting me up when I was a kid. My mom being my biggest cheerleader. I mean, my dad was my biggest cheerleader too, but my mom I was around that more. And she just thought that I could do no wrong. She just thought that I mean, I was a turd and I was a brat, but in terms of my personhood, like my mom always told us, me and my two siblings, that she was our biggest fan and that we were just the coolest. We were just the coolest people, and that she enjoyed our company. And listen, that bled through. That bled through into everything that I did, and including me running for student class president on like my second week of school. I move across the country and I go to this new school and they announced that they were doing like the class president election or whatever. And I really had the balls. I ran. I made posters. I had a slogan. It said new student, new ideas. And it was neon green posters with like hot pink letters, and I put my headshot on there. You couldn't tell me anything. And did I win? Absolutely not. That's insane. But I bet your ass everybody on that campus knew who Cara Campbell was. Um, so that's kind of like my foundation, right? Like that's kind of my like
absent, kind of emotionally abusive father. Um, Again, we're on good terms now. Like I have no beef with my dad, but this is just the truth, right? He did what he could with the tools he had, right? And I have that understanding now. Um, so I have that going on in the background. I've got my ADHD, which made me struggle in school, but I still managed to kind of like skid under the radar. Um, all that's happening. And then I have all like these extracurricular activities I'm doing outside of the classroom that really boosted my confidence and made me feel like I had a purpose and I had a place and I had something to contribute. But all while like I'm having I'm having like mental breakdowns every year because I'm so burnt out. And I think I have a dumb complex. I think that I'm stupid because my teachers never tested me to be in GT classes, but I was friends with all those people. And and I felt like my teachers thought I was stupid because I talked a lot. Like I'm telling you, like I talked so much because again, ADD, like dopamine deficiency, like these if I'm sitting in a classroom for too long, I'm pissed. Like I'm bored. I'm trying to distract myself. I'm trying to dissociate anything to keep me from like having to pay attention. Um and so I would talk and I would distract people and I even had a 4th grade teacher, Mr. Porter. Hi Mr. Porter, if you're still out there. You're my favorite teacher. He's like the only teacher I ever had who understood what I needed. And I remember in 4th grade, I would always be wiggling around. Like that was the year I learned how to tap dance. And when I learned how to tap dance, I was a problem. Okay, I'll be the first one to tell you. I was tip tapping all up in those hallways, just making a ruckus. And I would be distracting to other kids because I sat in the front of the class, kind of closest to his desk, so he could kind of keep tabs on me. And he ended up moving me to the back of the class so that I could stand up while I did my work. And that was the first time I think I had any teacher really see that I wasn't stupid, that I wasn't a problem, that I was doing my work. I just did it differently. Like I just needed something different to help me um, with that. So if you're a teacher and you got some kids, some students who are of the female variety who are a little bit distracted and a little bit talkative, like maybe that could help them. Maybe they're ADD and they just need a little bit of understanding, right? So anyway, so it was like this good stuff, and then it was still like this negative stuff, and which all of us have that, right? All of us have. I'm sure there's a silver lining in all of our stories, as well as like a shit lining, if you will. Um, yeah, and so, but like the stuff that I was going through that was negative. Manifested in like a bunch of different bunch of different ways. Like it manifested into me people pleasing. It manifested into me being afraid of men. Like I didn't like being perceived. I didn't like. I actually hated the attention I got for my body. Like I'd been sexualized for my my tits and my ass since I was 12 years old. Like I got hit on by 30-year-olds at Subway when I was 15 with braces. And I hated that. I just felt so gross. I felt, which I think most women can relate to, just being objectified against your will. It just does not feel good. I got hit on by a guy at a Red Lobster when I was 14. Again, braces. And just weird stuff. I hated that shit. I didn't want to be perceived. I didn't trust men. I I was a people pleaser. I had a food addiction. Like that's up until a couple years ago. I mean, I still struggle with sugar, but like that was my drug of choice was food addiction. And not only that, but in high school I started partying. I started drinking because that was the only way that I knew how to make friends out there. Like I didn't have a community of people who danced. I didn't have a community of people who understood me or who understood just living in a military town. Like the thing about living in a military town is that everybody's got daddy issues or mommy issues because everyone's got an absent parent somehow. So you have this like shared trauma, I guess, and nobody really asks any questions. But in Maryland, that wasn't the case. Like I was living around with people, I was going to school with people whose parents have lived there for generations, whose family lived there for generations, whose parents knew each other and, went to cookouts and got drunk on holidays together. So I just felt like an oddball. And there were a couple people who were my lifeline, other oddballs, if you will. Shout out, you know who you are if you're listening to this. Um, yeah, but I started drinking and partying just so I could fit in and not just that, but just disassociate from how burnt out I was and how like sad I was and I didn't know where any of it was coming from and I went off to college and I kept doing the same thing. And when because I stopped dancing when I was in high school, I went to college and I danced in college, and I was dancing for my freshman year, 3 to 5 hours a day, um, or working out at least 5 hours a day. But I was eating 4 times more than that. Like when I went off to college, like I thought I had bad eating habits when I was in high school, but it was bad. I mean, I was living off Nutella and French bread, and every once in a while when I was feeling healthy, I'd buy a rotisserie chicken, and just eat that for a couple days. But it was so like I was so disassociated from my body and from my needs because my mom didn't really know how to cook. She had a negative relationship with vegetables growing up, and my dad was the one who, cooked more, or like, I don't know, made healthier meals, but he wasn't around. So, I ate a lot of sugar when I was a kid, and I ate like just a lot of shit food. We ate a lot of fast food because when I was dancing and I was doing all that stuff, and my mom had to drive through places because we didn't have time to go home and cook. I would literally be going from practice at 6 a.m. and then I wouldn't get home till 11 o'clock or midnight sometimes because my schedule was that jam packed. So I ate a lot of fast food, and I carried that on into college. And in college, I it got so bad to where I would people would bring like extra cookies and brownies up from the cafeteria for everyone to share, and I would just be like, "Bring them here, come on, Mama will eat them all." And I would eat like cookies and brownies all day because my sophomore or junior year, even the senior year, like these freshmen would just, they want to come in and make a good impression, and I just ate all the things. I would eat like I would all day long. I'd sit in this office doing my homework or working or whatever, and I would just eat fun sized Snickers bars, like two every 20 minutes, for 5 hours a day. And so I gained some weight. I gained probably about 50 pounds, and I got so, so, so sad. And not just sad from eating, and not just sad from the alcohol, and not just sad from feeling alone, but just everything, right? It's kind of like everything came to a head when I was in college because again, I stopped dancing after my freshman year. I didn't have any hobbies. I didn't date anyone. I think I had a high school boyfriend for about a year and a half, and we broke up my freshman year. And it just everything got really dark. Everything got really dark. And even though I had friends, and even though I was going out and I was having a quote unquote good time, the more I drank, and the sadder I got, the more aggressive I'd get when I would drink, like the more angry I'd become. And I started turning into this person that I didn't know. And to be honest, I don't know if I ever knew myself. Um, and I did not like what I saw in the mirror. I did not like my physical body was just a manifestation of what was happening inside of my mind. Um, and it was bleak. And and I know that we make this like weird deal about suicidal ideation, but I feel like if you've ever been that sad, like you've thought about it. I mean, I've thought about it. It was like a regular thought. It wasn't a regular thought of like I'm actually gonna do it, but I would think about like there was a point where I was just like, wow, like the world would be better without me. Like I'm a piece of shit. Like that was the thought I actually had, because what was I doing to contribute? What was I doing? What was the point? I couldn't think of a point. I just felt like I was turning my wheels and spinning my wheels and just eating to feel better and drinking to feel better and just doing anything to disassociate from my pain. And from there, I graduated college, and what was weird was that what kind of brought me out of it a little bit was I started looking into how to cure my ADHD, which I don't think you can, but how to help with my ADHD because mind you, while all this stuff is happening, like the through line throughout my life was like I would have a mental breakdown once a year from burnout, right? And it always happened in November. And I always chalked it up to seasonal depression, which that was part of it too, I'm sure. But I just really struggled. I really thought I was stupid. I really thought that like this ADHD was like the bane of my existence, and like that's why I was eating so much, and that's why I had bad grades, and if I had just gotten medicated, maybe I would have been better. Maybe I would have been smarter. And so my senior year, like right before I graduated, I started looking into like how can I help my ADHD, with medication, because I was like, maybe I'll go to the doctor. Maybe I'll finally get medicated. Because Adderall was being slung left and right in college. People who didn't even have ADHD were taking Adderall and studying and getting good grades, to my knowledge. And I had taken half an Adderall once, and I felt like I was in that movie, like Limitless. Like I felt like I had access to my brain that I'd never accessed before. And that was only half of an Adderall, and I wrote a 15-page paper in 3 hours. And I'm like, God damn, is this what I could have been doing the whole time, bro? Like, I just have access to my thoughts? Like, this is crazy. So I started looking into it, and I found article after article that was like, sure, you can get medicated, but you also need to take care of yourself. Like, yeah, you might have ADHD and you might be struggling, but have you looked into your sleep? Have you looked into your eating habits? Have you looked into how you dehydrated? Like, how are your relationships? And all these articles were just like talking about like, yeah, you can medicate, but like do that with taking care of yourself, right? And so I told myself, I said, okay, and this is kind of how I got into like health. I told myself, okay, I'm going to try this health thing first. And then if it's still bad, I'll look into medication, right? Spoiler alert, I've never been medicated. So the health thing worked, right? And so that led me into like basically a come to Jesus meeting with myself. So I spent a couple months. The first thing I did was I cut out dairy because I was like, my skin's so bad. I'm gonna cut out dairy and see what happens. And then I'm gonna start cooking more meals. And then I'm gonna start eating more vegetables and just really trying. And I was doing okay. I'd lost a little bit of weight. It wasn't about the weight though. It was just about me feeling better in my body. And And so one day I sat down. This was in the fall, so I already graduated. I lost a little bit of weight. I started my first job, which was way more active than I had ever been. Like my first job was in journalism, so I was I was clocking miles every day, just walking, covering football games, covering baseball games, just walking through parks to get random photos of whatever was going on. So I was feeling a little bit better. But then I watched this documentary called What the Health. And some of you guys might remember that it came out in like 2017. It came out in the fall. And I remember watching that documentary. And it probably wasn't the documentary. That was just the catalyst for what was about to happen. And what happened as soon as I watched that documentary, because it was about the food industry and the cows being slaughtered and the pigs and what's happening to our water and just basically advocating to stop eating animals, essentially advocating a vegan or vegetarian lifestyle. And I remember seeing that because at this point I was just straight up carnivore. I lived on quesadillas and steak and chicken and deli meats. I ate a lot of deli meat. I freaking loved club sandwiches. And I couldn't tell you when the last vegetable I consumed was. Like I didn't have a relationship with vegetables. I thought they were nasty. I'd have to choke them down when I try to attempt to eat them. I was just made of sugar, spice, and everything chubby. And so I watched the documentary, and as soon as I was done, it struck me to my core. Um, and I remember going into the bathroom, looking myself in the mirror, kind of being disgusted with myself, right? Because I really hadn't made that much of a change in my life. And I remember looking at myself and saying to myself, "How dare you? Like, how dare you not take care of this body? How dare you treat it so badly? You don't give it sleep. You don't give it water. You don't give it healthy food. You don't take it outside. You don't exercise it. How dare you?" And it was this moment or I was crying. And I would just, for the first time, I really saw myself. And I really saw how asleep I had been to all of the things I was doing to myself. I was asleep to all the choices I had been making. I was unconscious to them. And that was the first time that I woke up. And I just remember I was just at my grandparents' house by myself, just watching the documentary. And for whatever reason, it just sparked this thing in me, this like, it woke me the fuck up to my shit and what I had been doing to myself. I had been treating myself like garbage. I had been getting drunk like every other day. I had been just binge eating shit and sugar and feeling like garbage, but then being confused why I feel like garbage. Like make it make sense, you know? And I told myself, I was like, during this conversation when I'm staring at myself in the mirror and like crying and I'm so pissed at myself. I'm so angry. Like, and I was just so hurt. I was so hurt by the way that I had been treating myself and so hurt that like I was squandering such a beautiful life. At this point I was 23 and I had spent 23 years people pleasing and binge eating and walking on eggshells and living in survival mode and doing all this stuff and I was finally tired of my own shit. I was finally tired of making excuses. And from that day forward, I told myself, I said, you're a vegan now. This is how you're going to heal yourself. This is how you're going to make change. I don't want to hear anything about it. No ifs, ands, or buts. You're fucking doing this, period. I love you and you're going to act like it. I was a little bitch to myself, but in a good way. It was like the tough love I needed. It was the tough love that nobody else was going to give me, right? It was the tough love that it was just love. It was just conscious love. And I needed it. And so I gave it to myself. And from that moment forward, for 5 years, I was vegan. And within 3 weeks of eating vegetables and trying to learn how to cook, I was craving vegetables. I was craving health, right? I started eating beans. Like I used to gag when I would smell beans being cooked in the house somewhere. Now I'm just like, give them to me. Give me all the beans, And it was just crazy. And that was the catalyst. That was my first, I would say, spiritual awakening. My first wake up call of if you don't make a change, you're gonna die. And not die because I kill myself, but you're just gonna die like unhealthy. Like you're shaving off years of your precious life. Like if I would have kept going down the road I was going, I would have been diabetic within a matter of years. Absolutely, because I'm already predisposed because everyone in my family's got diabetes. Or I would have had I just something just if it wasn't that I just would have continued being deeply depressed because I've absolutely ebbed and flowed in and out of anxiety and depression my whole life. And at that point, I was definitely depressed for sure. I was definitely in a state of depression, chronic, I'm sure. But now I know it was situational because I was putting myself in the situation. Of course, you're going to be depressed if you're not feeding yourself well and you're not sleeping and you're not getting sunlight. Like naturally, that's a natural response that the body takes to wake you up to your shit. So from there, I just focused for 6-7 months on only eating healthier. That was it. I wasn't going to put the pressure on myself to work out. I wasn't going to put the pressure on myself to, do whatever because again, going back to my childhood, another part of my story is I had disordered eating my whole life. I did not know that binge eating was disordered eating until like 2 years ago. But I would binge and restrict and binge and restrict and binge and restrict from the time I was like probably 10 until like 4 years ago. It's crazy. It's crazy. And I didn't because my mom did that. She would do crash diets. She's done crash diets my whole life and that's what I would do. I would do crash diets where I would come home and eat ham and mustard for dinner and then go to school and eat tuna fish and lettuce and that would be what I did to lose weight as a teenager. and then whenever I would mess up, I would just totally binge on sugar, and it was just bad. And then you can imagine, like, with anxiety and depression, like, binge eating makes you feel real good until it makes you feel like shit, you know? Because I didn't turn to sex or drugs to make me feel better. I turned to food, um, and then eventually alcohol. And when I would drink alcohol, I would binge the shit out of that alcohol, and that would be gross, and I'd pass out, and it was terrible. So anyway, so that was my first, like, I would say, awakening to myself. Was in 2017 when I watched that documentary and had that come to Jesus meeting with myself. Um, and from there, that informed pretty much how I moved. That changed how I moved to the world forever, for the better. Um, I would say that a couple years went by, and as I started kind of feeling more in my body and more at one with myself, I started dating, right? And I had a high school boyfriend, but up until that high school boyfriend, like, I didn't like being perceived by men. I didn't trust them. I didn't like them. They made me feel uneasy. They made me feel like gross. But I grew up a little bit. I didn't date at all the whole time I was in college. I didn't talk to anybody. I was just too busy being depressed and sad. And and I was fatter, so like people they don't care about fat people. Like, um, and the people that I found attractive, they certainly they didn't think I was hot. But I also didn't feel like I was in my body. Like, I didn't feel like I was in the body that made sense for me. But then as I started eating healthier and cooking more and eating vegetables and researching how to be better and do better, and I kind of started working out, and I started feeling stronger, and I started feeling like a person again. I started feeling like Cara again. And I couldn't remember the last time I felt like Cara. I couldn't remember. I might have been a kid. Who knows? But I felt like for like the first time in my adulthood that I was beginning to feel like me, like the Cara G who's talking now. Um, and so with that, I had more confidence, and I was like, you know what? Like, I like me now. I like me because I've built a reputation with myself, and I've built an integrity with myself, and I like that. I like who I'm becoming. And so I felt more confident to like date and to reach out to people and be like, hey, and I just felt more curious, and I felt more alive, and I felt more ready to put myself out there. And so I did. And I met someone, and we related, and we weren't on the same page. So then I put my foot down, and then we stopped relating, only for me to turn right back around and start relating again, even though I knew it was bad for me, because this was the first person that I had liked or I had had interest in since I was in high school. So I was just so confused why it wasn't working out. And I was so confused, like, why they didn't think I was as special as I was. Um, and it just turns out, like, I found out that I was an anxiously attached person, which, makes sense because hashtag daddy issues, right? I was always seeking for that approval, and I was always seeking for that specialness, and treat me the way that I know that I'm supposed to be treated, damn it, you know? But they were avoidant, and that was a really hard lesson to learn. Essentially because especially because I'd always been taught, if the action like if like actions are louder than words. So I took this person's actions and I put all of the weight on there, and I was like, wow, like, they're giving me boyfriend, and we're doing all these things together, and we're dating, and we're like having a good time, but they weren't giving me any of the words. And that's why I was like, well, that's okay, because the actions are there. And like ultimately, like, that whole situation got me fucked up, because if the actions and the words don't match, like, you're in hot water, my guy. But, I didn't date for all of college, and I had a lot to catch up on. I had a lot to learn, and that was absolutely a learning lesson. And it broke my heart. Like, it made me so sad. And they were nice to me. Like, the way they treated me was really messed up, but also, now that I'm older and I'm wiser, like, I allowed it to happen, right? And so from there, like, my story kind of just goes from it goes from like me hating myself to me loving myself to me trying to share that with somebody. And the more that I elevated and I took care of myself, like, the stronger my power kind of became, and the more I loved myself. And I was like, oh my god, I love myself so much. Like, what would happen if I found somebody else who like loved themselves? Like, then we could just amplify this shit. And then cut to 2020. So at this point, I was a journalist and I was kind of over it, and not over it because the work, but over it because you didn't make any money. And I wanted to do something big, and I wanted to be able to. I learned very quickly. Oh my God. I'm so sorry. Well, I'm not going to cut any of this audio, so if you heard that, sorry. I choked on my own spit. But anyway, as a journalist, I was just over not making any money, and I had a lot of goals for myself. I had this like vision that, and I understood very, very early on that money buys you not happiness, but money buys you freedom. So I was like, I want to be free. I don't want to just be making $13 an hour my whole life, even though I loved being a journalist. So I got a new job. I moved out to Dallas, and then a worldwide pandemic hit. Like I signed a lease and everything, and I just thought, oh, like COVID will be over, soon enough. Like, remember when everyone thought it was gonna last 2 weeks? Yeah, LOL. What a time. So COVID happened. So then now I'm out here in Dallas. I don't know anybody. Everyone's on TikTok. Like that's like the only community you have because you literally can't leave your house or do anything. And I met this guy on the apps on I think Hinge. I'm not sponsored, and I will never be on the dating apps ever again. But there was a time where I was on the apps and I met this guy, and mind you, like I am this person now who loves myself, and I think I'm so cool, and I love my personality, and I love what I'm doing because I'm taking care of myself, and I've got this relationship with myself where I'm like I'm dope, and anybody with a brain would see that too, you know? And so I meet this guy. Let's just call him H. And we start like, talking in the app, and we're chit-chatting back and forth, and very quickly I realized like, oh, like this guy thinks that I'm great too. Dope. Like the last guy I tried dating didn't appreciate my greatness. And I was like, he's an idiot, But like this guy does. And very quickly my life became about dating for a while because I had kind of been in a good flow with like my health and like exercising and eating, and I would bounce back and forth because I mean COVID, you were lonely. Like if you didn't gain a COVID 20 pounds, I mean, were you really alive? I don't think so. If you obviously, this is not to be insensitive to everything that happened during COVID, but if you were somebody like me who was just working from home and you know just hanging out, I actually had a wonderful time in COVID because I had a lot of time to sit with myself. But anyway, so this guy was just he just like he kind of just was like, wow, you're amazing, and like we have all this stuff in common. And he was actually a person who started introducing me to some of the spiritual like woo woo stuff that I was kind of dabbling in, like into astrology, and I had heard about tarot cards, but I still had this like trauma that like it was for the devil, and like astrology was for the devil and witchcraft is for the devil and all this like Christian trauma. Um, but he kind of introduced me to some of that stuff, to tarot and into meditation and to more like spirituality centered topics, and essentially our first date lasted like 36 hours. We were just talking and talking and talking and talking and talking and talking and oh my god and oh my god and this and this and this and this, and he was like, wow, you're amazing, like, and I was like, thank you, I know, ha. But and we dated for like 2 months, right? And it was like this whirlwind romance. Like this was the first man I ever met who thought I was as great as I thought I was. And then very quickly, like maybe like 2 weeks in, like we were saying I love you to each other. Like we were camping, like we talked about how we had dreams and we manifested this, and like we called each other in, and we were twin flames, and we were all this stuff. Well, like 3 weeks after that, he just starts like nitpicking me, and like basically what I now understand is that he had love bombed me. And if you know anything about love bombing, it's narcissists usually do it because they idolize you, they put you on a pedestal. And then once you start actually dating, like their perception of you gets like warped, and then they see who you really are, and they're like, oh, I actually don't like you very much. And it's not because you did anything different, it's just because they changed their perception of you. And so and we only dated for 2 months, but in those 2 months, like, he ended up like moving in with my family. Like, it was just weird. It was a very weird thing. And it made me, when I came out of that, it made me feel, I felt so gross. I felt so gross that I had let somebody into my life who was so sticky. Like, he had this, like, he was a narcissist. And we, even when we broke up, I was such a people pleaser. Like, he's literally telling me, I think I'm a narcissist. We need to break up, because both of his parents were narcissists. And I was such a people pleaser, and I was so like desperate to hold on to like the idea of this thing, that I was like, no, like, we can work it out. Like, we don't have to do this. Like, we don't have to break up. Like, we can figure it out. Just, and a week after that happened, I was so grossed out with myself. I was so disgusted by my behavior, because I sat back. I had a week to think about it before he picked up the rest of his stuff from my apartment. And I was just like, ew, I really let this man talk to me the way he talked to me. He like started belittling me, right? Like 3 weeks in, he started belittling me, and everything that he liked about me, he started nitpicking, and he started like judging me about it. And like, I wasn't meditating right, and I wasn't journaling right, and I wasn't this, and I wasn't that. And I just thought about it like a week after we broke up, and I was just like, what the fuck, Cara? Like, how did you let this happen, bro? Like, this is what? Like, y'all, I've been talking too much. I need to take a swig of water. Not me coughing on a podcast. Hey, I can do whatever I want, okay? And this breakup just sent me into a spiral of like, who the fuck am I? What am I doing? Like, and what universe is what just happened okay? How did I let this person touch me? How did I let this person speak to me? How did I let them convince me that I loved them? Like, what the hell? I had never been love bombed before. It was this whole it was a whirlwind experience, like, because again, like, it was the first time I'd ever met a man who agreed with me on how wonderful I was. Right? Like, I'd spent all these years building myself up and taking care of myself and getting healthy and being vegan and sticking to my values of my health. And and to what? To just let somebody come in and just blow it all up? It was just, it shook me to my core. It shook me to my core. And it was just like, I can't even describe to you like how disappointed I was in myself, and how I blamed myself for allowing all that to happen, and how sad I was, and how I was just grossed out with my behavior. And then I had a realization. I had the realization that, no, this is not my fault. It is not my fault that he was a good actor. It was not my fault that like I believe people when they say things. It's not my fault that I chose to trust somebody and they betray and they just so happened to be lying. And the worst part is, I don't even think he thought he was lying. Like, he was going through his own journey of figuring out that he had narcissistic tendencies and that he was love bombing, you know? But I just took the information that was given to me and I ran with it. And I'm not going to apologize for that. Right? But that being said, this whole experience sent me on this journey of like spiraling of like, who am I? Like, what do I value? Like, what do I care about? What do I want to do? Who do I want to be? Like, what do I want my life to look like? How do I make sure this never happens again? You know? Because at this point, my experience with men was, my high school boyfriend was wonderful, for a high school relationship. That was my first love. He treated me so well, like a princess. And it was a very mature relationship. We broke up because we were never going to live together. We were never going to live near each other ever again. And that was fine. Whatever, beautiful. But then it's like my second situation with the man was like, you know, the runner and the chaser, the avoidant and the anxious, and he was shitty and he had his own issues, his own avoidant situation going on. And that wasn't my fault. So this is my third experience with a man, and he love bombed me and gaslit me and made me feel like shit about myself. And like it kind of altered my reality. Like I there was a moment there before we broke up where I was like, maybe I'm the problem, because he would use all this spiritual psychobabble bullshit against me. He'd be like, are you sure you're mad at me, or is that just like a you problem you're projecting? Are you projecting? Like, he was one of those people, one of those spiritual assholes. He very much so had like the energy of like a cult leader. Like, he could have easily been a cult leader. Like, he missed his calling there. um but like a subtle one, I guess. Anyway, I wish all these people the best. I really do. But anyway, so this H guy, like he like triggered this second wave of my spiritual awakening, right? The first one was like waking up to my own shit and getting tired of it and doing something about it. The second one was me waking up to all of my unhelpful coping mechanisms in relationship, right? So the first awakening I had was an awakening to myself, right? Of how to take care of myself. And my second awakening was my awakening to my relationships, specifically romantic. I never had a problem with friendships, but my romantic relationships were fucked up. And this relationship in particular is what spiraled me into my father wound, into my daddy issues, into my coping mechanisms, into how I fawn and people please the men that I'm attracted to, the men that I'm interested in, and how unhelpful those habits were and how unhelpful those habits are. And I was like, I don't ever want to do this again. And like, how do I get there? Right. Which led me to reading books and ingesting podcasts and just like looking for the answers literally anywhere, everywhere. I read so many books. Like I read, Attached. I read Conversations with God. And the Conversations with God book is actually the book that changed my life, that I spoke about in the last episode. But anyway, so I started doing all this inner work. I kept meditating and I started journaling, and I listened to the podcast, and I figured out that I'm a fawner, and I figured out that I'm a people pleaser, and I came across something at some point, maybe on the internet, maybe somewhere else, that basically actually I have an ex friend who I think brought this point to me at some point, and they were like, people pleasing, if you look at it, is just a form of manipulation. Which is crazy, because if you're a people pleaser, you think that you're doing things for the betterment of people. You think that you're helping by like making sure everyone's happy or whatever. But you're actually lying. When you're people pleasing, you are putting your needs below others. Like, you are denying your truth to appease others in their experience, which withholding the truth is lying. You know what I mean? Like, like if you're, for instance, like people pleasing, it showed up in my life with my dad, like where I would walk around on eggshells and make sure I made myself nice and small so that I didn't do anything to trigger him. But that wasn't an authentic experience for me. That was me lying to my dad to manipulate his behavior so that I didn't have to deal with the negative consequences of him being angry at me. Right? It's a survival mechanism. And I wasn't doing it with ill will or ill intent, but it doesn't change the fact that I'm lying, right? Because if I was being honest, I would, when you're a kid, it's hard to do this because, you're a child and it's your parent. But now I advocate for myself and I don't people please when I'm in a situation like that. Instead of, being quiet and making myself small and tiptoeing around a person like that with those tendencies who have hairline triggers. Instead, I speak my truth. I say, I'm uncomfortable and what you're doing is incredibly unnecessary. Or I do it with love, or I just won't put myself in the situation to be there, right? but when that was presented to me in that way, I was like, holy shit, like I am denying my truth around men and just around people in general. Like I've always been the, yeah, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to do. And I realized like I didn't have favorite things. I didn't have like when it came to picking a restaurant in my friend groups, it's like, yeah, you got it. Like whatever you want. Or when it came to having a favorite color, I was just like, I don't know. I've never thought about it before. Like I remember being in the 5th grade and it was the first day of school and my teacher went around the room and asked everybody what their favorite color was. And I remember like panicking because I was like, I don't know. And then I remember a girl in my class was like, my favorite color is green. And I just thought, oh, well, she's cool. So that'll also be my favorite color. Right. And I just, that kind of behavior just followed me throughout my whole life. Like, yes, I was an individual in a lot of ways, but I was also just a chameleon. I was just a copycat in a lot of other ways because I didn't know what I liked. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know what I valued. I didn't know who I was or what I was about or like what I cared for. And then I figured it out. I read some books and this is around the time where like the Black Lives Matter thing was happening and COVID was happening and for the first time I started thinking about what I thought about these things and I started making choices and then I started, being vocal about these choices and about the things that I thought, on Facebook and Instagram and I started getting really overwhelmed with the news and I started just like I had this newfound voice of like advocating for myself and then I was advocating for others and I look back on me at that time and I'm just like, bless your heart. Like you were really out there. You were really trying. You were really trying to do something. And now I live a more balanced life. I can see things more clearly and more, there's like 360 ways to look at anything, right? But at the time, it was important for me to just like to stake a claim, you know? And also this was around that time where that relationship happened and when it ended. That's when I started realizing my father wounds, and that's when I started setting boundaries with my dad. And that was terrifying. That was so terrifying. And it was so scary that like at first I had to set the boundaries with my dad through text message because I was like, I can't say it to his face because like I can't bear the idea of him like getting mad at me or like shutting me down. Like I will shut down. Because a couple of instances happened when I was an adult around this time where he blew up at me for petty little things and I was tired of it and I was like no, like this is not how I want to be treated, like if I'm not gonna let this man treat me this way, I'm not gonna let my dad treat me this way. You know what I mean? You're supposed to be the example of how men are supposed to treat me. Like no wonder I let myself be treated like shit. And I started getting really angry and I started getting like really mad, which is good because anger is a catalyst for change. Like anger is such a powerful force for change. It'll leap you to the next thing in the scale of enlightenment if you let it. And I started getting angry. I started pointing the anger at my dad for a good reason. I mean, the homie, like, again, I'm emotionally abusive my whole life, right? And again, I understand his behavior. It just doesn't excuse it. And that was kind of my mantra for several years. So then I started tackling my father wound, right? And I was just like, damn, this is hard work. And to the point where like last year or the year before, I can't remember, like I didn't talk to my dad for a year. And that was really tough. And it made me really sad because he didn't talk to me for a year. And and that broke my heart. But a thing that changed my life was just like I don't want to live a life where I'm constantly hoping and wishing that the people I'm surrounded by change. Like if they were just a little bit better in this way, if they would just do this work, if they would just do this. No, I don't want to do that. Because if somebody were to do that to me, I'd be pissed. I'm like, I'm great, I'm wonderful. Don't sit here and tell me I need to change. Like accept me for who I am or get out. And that's the same energy that I approached like my dad with and because I want to love him for who he is and I want to meet him where he's at, but it just took I needed that separation and I needed
I needed to grieve the father I always wanted. I needed to grieve the person that he wasn't before I could accept him for who he was. Because for several years, like especially after that relationship, after that guy showed me all of my shit and all the ways that I've like all the ways I was just picking my father, you know, and letting myself be treated that way in this new romantic relationship. I was just like, no, like I don't want that. And so I did. I grieved my father and you know, after the year was over and I kind of accepted with boundaries. Like I let my dad know very clearly what I was willing to put up with and what I was not. I spoke my truth. I told him. It took me 3 different times, 3 different instances, and we haven't had a hiccup since. But the last instance before I stopped talking to him was like I was done. I was done. I was like, no, we're not doing this. You don't get to I don't get to keep traumatizing little me, right? And that's another big piece of my journey is of me cutting off communication from my dad for a minute was I thought that because I had done this work with little me, right? After that toxic relationship, I had to forgive myself. I had to tell little me like I'm sorry, like that I put you through that, you know. And the same thing happened when I went vegan. I was like, I'm sorry that I've been feeding you garbage, you know, to little me. That's been a big piece of this journey for me too. But anyway, I thought that I thought adult me could hack being around my dad when he would be, you know, emotionally abusive. Like I thought that, oh, like I'm the adult now, like I'm the parent. I can handle this. We're going to be good. And what I realized is like it doesn't matter if I'm grown me or little me, like we're still in the same room at the same time. Little me is still hearing all the words that are coming out of my dad's mouth. You know, and I just refuse to keep re-traumatizing myself. And and that's what I did. So I cut off communication and I grieved and I was so angry. Like so angry and it was so hard because my mom she would just wanted me to hold all the space for my dad and to just meet him where he was at before I was ready. And I was just so angry. I was like, I've held so much space for so many shitty men. And I'm not saying my dad's shitty, but the way he acts sometimes is. And that's the truth. We can all be shitty, right? But I was like, I've held so much space. I was like, when is someone gonna hold space for me? When do I get when are they gonna meet me where I'm at? You know? And the answer is I don't know, but I can meet me there. And I will. And I do. And I've continued to do so. And it was hard because like my mom's my best friend and it put a tiff between us and um because it was like I knew she wasn't going to pick sides. I knew she wasn't, but like you know, deep in my core, I wish she would. I wish she could understand where I was coming from, and I think she could understand, but um, she would never agree with what I was doing, and that hurt me. That hurt me really bad, but it didn't matter because I did what I needed to do. I listened to my intuition, and at this point, I had built such a reputation with myself where I was like, I trust you. You've been taking care of us. I trust you. Whatever you need, take it. We're gonna be okay. And that's what I did. And right around the time that I was kind of wrapping up that grieving process, I had met the man who I ended up falling in love with. That was like the healthiest, best relationship I've ever been in. And you know, all throughout this time, like I'm still living my other life. I'm still working. I'm still accomplishing things. I'm still living my life. I'm still being me. I'm still being that same girl who wears bold lipstick and I had learned how to salsa dance during this time period that I wasn't talking to my dad, and I made friends in Dallas, and I felt like I was finally starting to like, be a part of a community, and but like this background work was what was ruling my life, right? And yeah, and then I met this wonderful man, um, and I'm still in love with him, you know, and that's kind of where I'm at now. Is I'm where I'm at now and also during this time like I've gone to health coach school and I've learned so much about like holistic health and
I'm no longer vegan, right? I've learned so much about protein and macro and micronutrients and just how to live a holistically healthy life from the inside out, like from your community to your relationships to your food to your exercise, all these things that like my father wound, like dealing with that was just like I felt like that was like my last level of doing the core curriculum of like sifting through my childhood trauma, right? And now my dad and I are cool. Like he just spent 4 days at my house, like fixing, a bunch of stuff, and we hung out and we ate food, and there's this respect there, and like he knows what I expect and I know what he expects, and now we're chilling. I can meet him where he's at because I'm no longer like hoping and praying and begging that he changes. I can just enjoy him for what he is. And that's how I ended up being in that relationship with the man who was wonderful. Is I could meet him where he was at because he's got a lot of qualities of my dad, but he's got a lot of the good qualities of my dad. They say you marry your father, but a lot of people just they marry like the bad, like the negative side, like the unhelpful side of their father. Whereas like I have no problem marrying my father, like the good parts, like the parts that are helpful. If my dad would have never been traumatized, he would have been wonderful. Like just from the get, the whole time. Um, and so and doing that work helped me show up in this relationship uh, with the man I still love. We're no longer together, technically, but we still love each other. And the fact that I can even say that, the fact that I can even walk away from a relationship from a man that I'm still actively in love with is like it's crazy. But like that's how much effort and time and intention I've put into what I want and how I want it and who I am and who I want to be. And I take that shit so serious. And that kind of leads me to where I am today. Like I know that was a long history of who the hell Cara G is, but I just wanted to lay out the foundation of who I am. And I want you to know what I'm about and what I value and how I got here. I'm not again, I am not a special person, but what I have done is when I say I'm not a special person, I'm not a special person in the grand scheme of humans, right? But what I have done is I've honored my specialness. I woke up to my shit. I woke up to the version of me that was self-abandoning. And I said, "Whoa, what are we doing here, guys? Okay, I've been asleep for 23 years. What the hell? Like, we're a mess." And so then I started taking steps to take care of myself and, you know, learning like the veganism led to me learning how to cook, and it led to me drinking more water and doing more research on what foods do to your body, and that led me to like exercising and learning how to exercise and learning how lifting weights and walking and dancing, how that affects your body, and sleep. It got me into learning how to sleep. I literally watched a freaking sleep seminar or webinar during COVID because I was just like, this is fascinating, and how sleep affects your health, and then how your relationships affect your health, and everything just has come back to health is wealth. If I don't have this, what do I have? And on top of that, your relationships are a massive part of your health. And if you're nothing without your health, then you are nothing without your relationships, right? And I want deep, big, beautiful, loving, expansive relationships with my friends, with my family, and with my partner. And I feel like right now, where I'm at in my life, I am like just now getting to taste that. I am just now getting to feel the bigness of myself, feel the fullness of my relationships, and I'm just excited to see where it goes. With this last romantic relationship I was in, like it had the foundation to be something really big and really like just fucking incredible. And it was incredible and it was big for what it was.
but it had a, and he's listening to this, which makes me laugh, but it's the truth. Everything I'm saying here, I've said to him, but it had the potential to go the length, to go the distance, and everyone around us could see that. And I felt it, and I know it, and I just know things now. Like the more this work you do, the more you get to know yourself, the more you build a relationship with yourself, like the more you just know things, the more you just know when something is right for you. Like that serendipitous feeling, that intuition, that gut feeling, like it just gets stronger and stronger to the point where you're like, you feel like a psychic, you feel like you're magical. Um, and that's kind of how I felt, how I still feel about this relationship. However, sustainability is my number one, right? Like if my health and my relationships are what I care about most, like the sustainability of maintaining those healthy relationships and my health, I mean, in my body, that's the most important key. And in order to maintain sustainability, you have to have the tools. You have to have the tools. And the difference between me and the partner who I was dating, I've spent a lot of time collecting those tools because it's been my priority for so long. Like relationship, the goal of having that big expansive relationship has been it's been my priority for so long, whereas I think he's just now getting there. So he's just now looking into getting the tools, and that's beautiful, right? And I'm not saying that I'm above or below or whatever, but I think down the line, if the tools are there, like maybe we will revisit, and I would love that. That would be amazing. And if you're listening, I mean it. um, but anyway, but that's kind of that's where I'm at. All of that leads me to right now on this podcast. And earlier this year, I had been journaling and I found some old notes that I had written to myself while I was going through all these experiences. And I just thought, what would happen if I just shared them? What would happen if I shared them and I spoke to where I was at when I was going through that? I wonder if that would help people. I wonder if it would help people to hear exactly how I maneuvered and what steps I took. Um, and even though this has been a long episode and a long explanation of like the wholeness of my life, like each one of these experiences that I've talked to and that I've touched on, like I have so much to say about them in terms of what I did to get through them and the books that I read and the podcasts that I consumed and like the ideals that I found that saved me, that woke me up to my shit, that woke me up to the shit of others. And that have been guiding lights for me throughout this journey. And on top of that, like I've started journaling, during the course of this. So like there's like I want to go back and read some of these journal entries, even though it's my private life. Like I don't give a shit, right? I don't care. I have like I think that it's radical honesty, radical responsibility, like that stuff gets me up in the morning. I just think it's my story is my story, and like I am not afraid to share that all in all of its patheticness and all of its sadness and all of its triumph and all of its glory. Like it's all me. It's all a part of the journey of me unfolding my perfection. Because right now I feel perfect. Right now I feel so aligned. Like I'm moving to California for this job, and to give you context, like literally in the last 57 days, the partner who I love and we broke up. Okay? The partner I thought like we were going all the way with, right? We broke up because I accepted the truth for what it was. Okay? Not only did we break up, I got fired from the contract job that I was working out of nowhere through text message. Okay? Two massive things. I quit my 9 to 5 earlier this year. Like I dyed my hair red. I'm launching this podcast. Like just so many things are happening, and they're happening like faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. And I cannot help but think and to know that it's because I've just been exponentially getting better and better and better at knowing who I am, knowing what I'm about, and sticking to it, and listening for what makes sense for me and when it makes sense, and trusting myself to make choice, and trusting myself to
I'm just trusting myself to surrender. Like I'm surrendering. I'm trust falling into myself every day more and more. And I I want everyone to know what that feels like. And it's not going to happen for you the same way it happened for me, but what I can do is I can I can encourage you to listen to your intuition, to get still, to get silent. I can use my education and health coaching to inform and to edit some of those ways, and like to edit and cry and analyze what I went through with like this 2020 vision, you know? So, I mean, that's me. I think I pretty much covered all of it. I mean, Jesus, it's only almost been 2 hours, but if you're like me, I love long podcasts. Um, because just who doesn't? Like, am I Joe Rogan? I don't know. Shout out. He just be shooting the shit, and me too. Not all the episodes are gonna be this long because I did start from like the beginning of my life. Um, but yeah, I just right now I feel like I'm in my third wave of awakening, and I didn't even know I was gonna say that or that I was gonna think that until just now. But it happened when me and my partner broke up like 2 months ago. That was that has kickstarted this third wave of like my fuck it era. Like I am in my fuck it era. Like I have learned so much and I have done so much, and there's no reason for me like to just sit and wait for anything. I have been sitting and waiting for things my entire life, thinking that other people have the answers for me, thinking that if I do things the conventional way, I'm gonna have the freedom and the money and all this stuff, and I'm gonna have the love. If I just keep myself small and put my head down, like everything will come to me. But that's just not true for me at all. Because I don't want conventional if that doesn't make any sense for me, right? Like I could have easily with this last for instance with this last partner coped with it the way that I used to. I could have just made myself smaller and smaller while I and like didn't speak up for what I needed, and I could have just like stayed in it longer and longer and I would have grown to resent my partner because I wouldn't have been advocating for myself, and I would have people pleased my way into, you know, we would have, you know, gotten engaged or something, and then he would have, you know, and then maybe would have imploded later down the line, but I was just like, no, no, we have a good thing, but it's not sustainable right now. And I'm not going to wait for us to hate each other to figure that out, you know? And the same thing with myself. I'm like I stopped being vegan because I realized I wasn't doing it the appropriate way. Like I wasn't getting enough protein and I wasn't getting enough iron and I felt like shit and I was so tired all the time, and I couldn't let the information that I had learned, I couldn't just let that sit idly by like and be like, "No, I'm vegan and that's my personality, so I'm not going to make these edits and changes as I go because, you know, just because I don't want people to think that I'm like wishy-washy or like what I'm like what do I care what people think? Right? Like this is my life. I get to with new information, I get to make new choices and I get to continue the dance with the universe. And I get to continue editing and copying and pasting and backspacing, and you know, like we can do whatever we want. And if you get anything out of my story, it's that shit gets better. But you have to try. And you have to give yourself the chance. And you have to show up for yourself and you have to do it consistently, and you have to forgive yourself when you don't. And that's all I've really done, right? Like and I'm the first person to tell you like I'm incredibly proud of myself. I'm not proud of myself because I've done anything special or crazy. I'm proud of myself because I continue to show up every single day for my truth. And I live it and I stand by it, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it pisses me off, even if it makes me work harder than I want to, even if it breaks my fucking heart, I stand by my truth and I honor it with everything that I have. And that's who the hell Cara G is. That's who I am. That's what I value. That's what I'm about. And that's what I hope everyone around me takes away from relating to me, or takes away from hearing me speak. Like, I hope that you can do and see that for yourself. I hope that you can honor yourself. I hope that you can love yourself. I hope that you can do the hard things because it's what's most helpful for you. And I am practicing this every day. Like, I struggle with this every day. Like, it is not easy being alive. Like, and in fact, I think being alive is inherently traumatic, right? Like, the trauma is promised, right? We're all promised death. We're all promised like heartache. We're all promised the death of our parents. Those are the things that we are sure about, right? But at the same time, life is so beautiful. Crying is beautiful. Death is beautiful. Like staring the person you love the most in the eyes and like walking away from them because you know that it's not right. You know that it's not the time. It's not sustainable. Like, that shit's hard and it breaks my heart, but it's just like, but I just know that this is what I need to be doing right now, you know? Anyway, that's who the hell Cara G is. Holy shit, it's been 2 hours. Like, I didn't know I had this many words inside of me. Cool. And I want to end this episode. Well, if you're still here, thanks. But I want to end this episode with some affirmations, right? We started the episode with gratitude. I want to end the episode with affirmations. And if you feel inclined, like, say them, right? But I like to end my journal. I like to end my journal entries. I journal every day, and I'll talk more about why in another episode. But I journal every day, and at the end of them, I always end with, at the very least, thank you, I love you. At the very least, I end every journal entry with thank you, I love you. And again, it's like I'm talking in second person, but that's me recognizing the effort that I've put in and giving gratitude and love and appreciation for showing up for me, for showing up for life, for showing up for everything that I'm about and everything that I want to be about and everything that I've been about. So yeah, so maybe try thank you, I love you in the morning and before you go to bed. I also like to say that I am love, I am light, I am magic. Those are another 3 that I really like. Other ways you can affirm yourself are like, I feel, I do, I am, and just, insert whatever you want. But that is today's show. Wow. Oh my gosh. Almost 2 hours. That's crazy. Thank you so much for listening. You can please follow the podcast on Instagram and YouTube. On Instagram, it's at Perfection Unfolding Pod. On YouTube, it's Perfection Unfolding, I believe, podcast, or Perfection Unfolding with Cara G. Please subscribe to the YouTube. I was going to post the video version of this episode, of the first episode, but then I was just like, you know what? Like, I am not going to give myself this extra step. I'm going to meet myself where I'm at. I'm going to keep posting the videos as like the audio forms. But that's the one place you can comment. And leave comments about the show if you liked it, if you got anything out of this. If anything surprised you about my story, like, let me know. Like, if you want to chop it up about anything else, you know that I like to talk, so hit me up. Like, subscribe, share this, rate this, review it on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you listen to the podcast. New episodes every Tuesday. You can follow me, your host, at Cara G. Campbell. You can also follow me at Nature Cara. I have a nature page, and now that I'm moving out to California, I'm sure I'll be posting more on there, just of all the beautiful naturescapes in the mountains. You can also follow me at Cara G Photography. Again, I got a lot of Instagrams. I got a lot of hobbies. And then I will soon be posting on Cara G Coaching. I am a certified health coach. So if you are interested in health coaching, or if you resonated with anything that I said here on today's episode, I do holistic health coaching. My main demographic is women, but I am totally down to help out all you men and you non-binary and in-betweeners. Um, but yeah, you can find me at caragcoaching.com, caragphotography.com. And yeah, follow Perfection Unfolding and let's boost this app. Let's boost it. Let's just make it happen. So this has been lovely. I love you guys. Thank you so much. And I will talk to you next Tuesday.